Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars, welcome to another of my list. Today's list is a top 15 list of the games that I essentially grew up on. Now, when I say grew up on, I'm getting on a bit now, I'm almost 50, and I've been playing games a long time. I go back as far as Atari 2600s, and Spectrums and Commodore 64s and Master Systems. So those are the games that were really a big part of my earlier life, but I don't think this list would be particularly interesting if it was just full of Spectrum games, Commodore 64 games, and certainly Atari 2600 games. So this list is games that essentially I have been playing and really enjoying since they came out, and most of these games are pretty historical. I think the oldest one on this list is something around 2003, so they're about 20 years old and beyond, some of these games. And these have it was an interesting list to put together this, because I could see when I was putting this list together, and I could have gone on for a lot longer than 15. It kind of showed me my patterns of gaming these days, and how I came to enjoy the games that I play now at the age I'm at now. So quite an interesting list to do. As always, guys, fire it in the comments, your ideas, your favourite games that you've grown up on. I would very much like to see that as well. So I do hope you enjoy watching this. It's worth pointing out as well, guys, that this list is in no particular order because they are all games that bring back fond memories for me, so I don't have any particular favourites here. But the first game I want to talk about is Tekken 2. This is a PlayStation 1 game, and even though I did enjoy the first Tekken, I do remember spending an awful lot of time playing Tekken 2 with my brother when it was first released. I used to love playing as Law because he reminded me of Bruce Lee. It's got some iconic characters that are still being used today. I'll be honest, I don't really play fighting games anymore. I don't really have the patience for them. And I wasn't a massive fan of fighting games back then, but Tekken 2 was definitely one that I absolutely put so many hours into. It was a really fun game to play. So yeah, Tekken 2 for me was definitely one of the best early beat-em-ups that the PlayStation put out, and I really, really enjoyed it. Now, the next game I want to talk about is Syndicate. Now, this was released way back in '93. I think I played this on a PC. It could have been my Commodore 64. I'm not 100% which, but this is another game that I absolutely loved. It's aged like milk, really, this game, but essentially you had like a team of robots stroke androids that you kitted out with some really cool weaponry and all this kind of stuff, and then you'd head off into the city and do certain missions. Some of them would be like assassination type missions, all this kind of stuff, and then you would go back to your base, you'd research new equipment for your team, you'd equip them with all sorts of better equipment and send them out on new missions. It was a brilliant game back in its day. I do know they did try and reinvent it. I think it on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. They did like a first-person shooter of Syndicate that flopped, I think. But the original Syndicate was very good, and I hope they bring it back one day. And next game I want to talk about is Star Trek 25th Anniversary. This was released way back in 1992. Again, I suspect I played this on some form of PC, and I think this is the game that initially started my love for point-and-click adventures. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Star Trek, so I was a fan of Star Trek back then. This was like a dream for a Star Trek fan because it was fully voice acted by the original cast of the Star Trek's TV show and movies. So we had William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, had the whole crew here, and it is really basically a point-and-click adventure game, this. It doesn't last particularly long. I don't remember how long it takes to complete it. Hopefully, I'm going to be getting a Steam Deck this year, and this is a game I will definitely be rebuying on Steam and playing again because it's got some great nostalgia value for me. And Star Trek fans have always been fond of this game, myself included. The next game I want to talk about is Rocky on Master System, released in 1987, which really surprised me. I didn't realise it was that old. Now, I did have a Master System when I was younger, and I remember being really excited to play Rocky when it first came out, and it was at the time, it was like a dream for Rocky fans because you got to fight Apollo and Clubber Lang and Drago. Excuse me. All these iconic figures from the film series, you got to fight them. I mean, it is very, very basic when you look at it these days. And if you ever played it these days, there's been obviously better Rocky games released since. The Rocky games they released on the PlayStation 2, Rocky Legends and so forth, were very, very good. But at the time, you've got to remember this was 1987. This was, a boxing fan and a Rocky fan's dream to play. And I remember having many, many hours of fun playing this one. So, great game. The next one is the XFiles on PlayStation 1. This was released back in 1998. It was an FMV game. And at the time, in the late 90s, X-Files was like the biggest TV show in the world. It was, I mean, honestly, it was a huge, huge show. So I was hooked on the show myself personally, so I was really excited to get my hands on this FMV game when it was released. I was disappointed initially because you don't play as Mulder and Scully. You play as like a different FBI agent, and your job is to kind of track down Mulder and Scully. It's really good. It's really fun. It's got some really cool FBI investigation stuff going on. And I've always really enjoyed it. This is one of those FMV games that I've completed multiple times back in the day. If you ever re-release it on PlayStation 5, I will re-buy it again because it brings a lot of nostalgia value for me. Very, very good indeed. Now, next on the list is WWF No Mercy. This was released on N64 way back in the year 2000. This for me was a system buyer. I didn't have an N64. And I remember getting an N64 basically so that I could play this game, which hasn't really happened often for me, buying a system just to play a game. But this was the wrestling game to play at the time. And, the Attitude Era was still very, very popular. It was just moving into the Ruthless Aggression era. And this was a wrestling fan's dream. And it was iconic at the time and is still iconic today. The next game I want to talk about is the LMAO Manager Series. Now, it's not anyone in particular because I basically played them all. It was initially released on the PlayStation 1 and the series continued onto PlayStation 2. And that was it. We never got any more after PlayStation 2, at least as far as I'm aware we didn't. I don't think we ever got any on PlayStation 3, but I could be wrong. This, for me, was an absolutely fantastic football manager game. And this is why I complain every year we never get a decent football manager game on PlayStation. We have never had a decent football manager game on PlayStation since the LMAO series. It was really good. It was really detailed. It had a pretty good match engine. It had highlights. It did like a match of the day type thing. It was just really, really good. And I was hooked on this game and I played it endlessly with my brother because we're both football fans. Such a shame that this game kind of faded into obscurity because it was a brilliant manager game. The next wrestling game that I played to death, and it certainly molded my love for wrestling games, was WWF SmackDown 2. Now, I played WWF Warzone when that came out, and I considered putting that on this list instead of this. But then, while that was one of the first wrestling games I ever played, it was pretty crappy too. This is the first wrestling game I remember playing, being really quite impressed with in a lot of ways. When you look at it now, it looks pretty terrible. But at the time, you've got to remember when this came out, this was pretty damn good. And fans of wrestling were really, really in for a bit of a treat with this game. It was fun. It had a really up-to-date roster. It was fast-paced. And I just remember absolutely sinking loads and loads of hours into this game. A very good and enjoyable wrestling game back in the day. Now then, who remembers this? Elite. This was released way back in 1984. I doubt I played it way back in 1984. It might have been a bit later, but I do remember playing Elite. Because, I mean, as you know, guys, if you know my content, I do have Elite Dangerous at the minute, and I play a lot of that. And my love of space sim games came from this original Elite game. It looks chronic now when you look at it, but at the time it was just like a little boy's dream, being in charge of your own spaceship, flying from different spaceports, being a pirate, being a trader. You could do all them things. I remember it being incredibly hard though, and very, very frustrating. But definitely a huge game from my childhood that I really, really enjoyed playing an awful lot. Now then, another point-and-click game. This is Broken Sword Shadow of the Templars, and this was released on the PlayStation 1 back in 1996. Now, while the Star Trek 25th Anniversary game might have initially started my love for point-and-click adventure games, this really harnessed it. This and the Monkey Island games, I'd say. I've played all the Broken Sword games. I've really enjoyed all of them. I find them really, really well written. It's got a great voice cast. It's, the games focus on George and Nico, kind of solving mysteries, solving murders, solving crimes. The art style's really charming. The dialogue's amusing, and it's while it's challenging, it's not brain-meltingly challenging. I've always managed to get through the puzzles eventually, all that kind of stuff, when I've played these games. And I just really, really have got such an affection for the Broken Sword games. Now then, Wing Commander 3, The Heart of the Tiger, released on the PlayStation 1 back in 1994. Again, this enhanced my love of space sims. I'm begging you, PlayStation, please remaster these games. Leave the FMVs in and just remaster the cockpit gameplay, because the Wing Commander game, Wing Commander 3, was just incredible. It was absolutely brilliant. I mean, the cast, when you look at it now, you've got Mark Hamill and Malcolm McDowell and so many recognisable faces. I was hooked on the FMV stuff. It really made you feel like you were in a movie. And at the time when it came out, the cockpit stuff, the shooting down of the ships and all that kind of stuff, it was a joy to play. And this is one of those games that I have played and completed dozens of times back in the day. I just loved replaying it because it was like rewatching a movie for the most part. Really, really good stuff. And honestly, I would absolutely be beyond excited if these got a remaster. Next game, Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation 1 back in 1998. Now, I have to be honest, these days, I don't necessarily enjoy stealth games, but back in the day, they were unheard of, really. This was the first one, arguably, to do it, and certainly to do it well in such a big budget way. And this is one of those games that I've played through multiple times when it came out. It was incredible stuff. I mean, great boss battles, fantastic dialogue, great action, and it was revolutionary, I think it's fair to say. And the Metal Gear Solid franchise, it turned into a massive juggernaut, and they just kept getting better and better and better. The first Metal Gear Solid game is one of the highlights of PlayStation 1. It is just that simple. And I can't talk about Wing Commander 3 without talking about Wing Commander 4. Essentially, they go hand in hand, really, because I think they are both top quality games. Wing Commander 4 was called The Price of Freedom. It was a different story, almost like a swapping of the sides by Mark Hamill. There was this conspiracy going on. It was really fun. They had enhanced the combat a little bit. It did feel a little bit better. It just felt like, for me, playing they complemented each other so well. It was one of those scenarios where I would play Wing Commander 3 and then immediately I would move on to Wing Commander 4. And I would do that probably 2 or 3 times a year back in the day on the PlayStation 1. And I just ate it up. They were fantastic. They felt like epic games, stroke movies, and the production values you couldn't really fault. I really do miss the Wing Commander series, and I do hope someday it makes a return. Now then, Final Fantasy VII, released way back in 97 on the PlayStation 1. This was the first game that I played that you could describe as an RPG, certainly that I can remember anyway. I just remember being absolutely hooked on this game. The story, the narrative, everything about it just drew me in. I'd never played a game like it. The summons, when you summon the huge creatures, it was just an event to me. It was like, what is going on? The graphics and the effects, they might look terrible now, but certainly back when this came out, it was incredible to play. And another game that I have completed multiple times and definitely triggered my absolute love for RPGs in general. It's an absolute juggernaut of a game, this, and I think a very, very important historical game as well, certainly for PlayStation 1, but for RPGs in general. Now, the last game that I want to talk about is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Now, this, again, to me, was a system seller, because I had never had an Xbox up to this point. I just played on PlayStation, and this was an exclusive to Xbox at the time, so I had to buy an Xbox to play this game, and my God, I wasn't disappointed. For me, this is my favourite RPG of all time. Like many of you, this got me really excited when I heard that this was getting a remaster last year. Very, very disappointed to hear that it looks like it's been shelved. I don't know if it's going to be permanently shelved. I'm really, really praying that someone can do this game justice and remaster it properly, because essentially it will be a smash hit if done properly, if someone re-releases this and does it to a really good standard, because simply put, it is just an incredible RPG and an incredible Star Wars game, the best Star Wars game of all time in my opinion.